Eliane. Hey everyone, thank you for joining. Hey Mish,
Hey Dan. Hey Ariana.
how you doing?
Good, thanks, and how are you?
Good, Mish. Thank you so much for joining the live. We've been really excited about this one.
Yes, me too.
I know that you've done a lot in this last year. Last year, you were Miss South Africa semi-finalist. So I just wanted to introduce you briefly, and then you can give us a bit of a background into how you've got to where you are today.
Sure.
Hi everyone, my name's Daniel Marsh. I'm from Marsh Fidelity. I'm joined with Ariana Dwyer, my colleague. Today we've got an awesome guest, Michelle Bisset. Mish is a mom, she's a wife, she's a Miss Africa semi-finalist, she's a Comrades runner, and she owns her own law firm and is part of Quattro Legal as well. So Mish has really accomplished a lot. Mish, if you just want to give a bit of an introduction as well into yourself and what you do, and we can just go from there.
Cool. Yeah, Shane, thanks so much, Dan and the Marsh Fidelity team for having me. I'm very excited and I've really been looking forward to this. We've worked closely together for a while now, so it's amazing to be able to have these discussions with you on a public platform. And I think you've given a really good introduction to my background and who I am. But I'm a local Upper Highway area, always have been. Head up Quattro Legal, which is part of the Quattro Finance Group in Durban. And we specialize in helping small to medium-sized businesses with their commercial legal needs. So particularly from an estate planning perspective, succession planning, and just generally commercial structuring of those sort of owner-managed businesses.
Mish, I just wanted to, I love running, so I just wanted to chat about this just briefly. I just wanted to understand, I think our followers might appreciate, how your mindset has changed for you to be able to achieve so much in your life so far. And I mean, especially with Comrades, because what I love about running is that sometimes our mind will say we can only do 5Ks. And when we've done 10 to 15Ks, we realize that we can actually accomplish more than maybe the limits we put on ourselves. So how have you been able to break through those limits? I mean, Comrades is like 89Ks or something. So where does your mind go to get you to complete that?
So I mean, it definitely comes down to mindset. And I think that's important for every aspect of life. It comes down to your perspective and what you're willing to put your mind to. Obviously, running something like the Comrades Marathon requires an immense amount of sacrifice, training, discipline, but it is the most rewarding experience. And I always say to people, I think that every South African should run the Comrades Marathon. To be able to run, from Durban to Maritzburg or Maritzburg to Durban, depending on whichever way you're running, is the most thrilling experience. The support along the road, and I think Comrades wouldn't be the same if you didn't have the support of the people along the way. Especially being a local Hillcrest girl, to be able to run through Hillcrest is incredible. You feel like you're winning the Comrades Marathon when you're running through, and then you get to the bottom of Cowie's Hill and you realize you still have 25 kilometers to go. So, but it really is. It really is comes down to mindset. And I'm a strong believer that your mindset is everything.
And I think, Mish, even just the impact that you have, in particular for women in our community, is incredible. I know you started the Upper Highway Coffee Club, which our team will be part of on Friday. I think it's this Friday. You've got a meeting at Plantations Roundhouse. So I think, it's such a testament to ourselves that sometimes we put such limitations on what we are capable of. But if we change our mindset and say, well, let's just give it a try. Let me try and train for Comrades. I mean, just saying yes to stuff like that creates opportunities that you wouldn't even know were possible.
No, absolutely. And, a lot of people also say, well, I don't have the time. But if you really want to do something in your life, you'll make time. I mean,
Yes.
I ran my first comrades marathon when my baby was 11 months old.
Oh my word.
So, you know, it really just comes down to what you're willing to put into something.
Yeah. I think, like you said, like if you are consistent in preparation, and I think that, like you said, that leads into all aspects of life. And what we're discussing today is about business ownership. And most business owners have to be consistent to run a successful business. But the problem comes in is that they are so focused, and I know from my side that we're so focused on the day-to-day running of the business that often the estate planning or legal protection aspect of it kind of falls away, and it only comes up when it's an emergency.
Yes.
So I think the advice that you'll provide today might help people to try and reduce the burden if there is an emergency, because I know that you do legal planning for business owners, you have protection against risk. So I don't know, I know that you do a legal protection policy, I know that you do buy and sells, but if you can maybe just let us know what you have found has been important to business owners that you've been able to provide to them in the past.
Yeah, Dan, I think you hit the nail on the head. Business owners are so good at doing what they know, which is running their business or the trade that they're in. And we get so caught up in running our business that we forget, you know, to put those important estate planning or succession planning processes in place.
Yeah.
And we see it on a daily basis. You know, even when we consult with small business owners, they want to, and the intentions are always to put those in place, and we discuss them, but they never actually get down to it because it's always put to the side. But the way I look at it is that you spend your whole life building up a business, and then on death, you leave it, and you don't make provision for it, or you don't decide how it's going to be dealt with on your death. You know, it's probably one of the most fundamental things that you should be doing in your business is succession planning, and what happens if I die, or what happens if I become disabled. And we do see it time and time again where businesses come short because, you know, nothing has been put in place, and it puts the business and the employees in a difficult position. It puts the families in a difficult position. So it really is crucial to estate planning that we look at a business, and you guys will know from an estate planning perspective that, you know, those shares in your business, or if you're a sole proprietor, it forms part of your estate, and you have to deal with it.
Yeah, and I think what you put there is very important for people to consider, because often when you're running a business, it's just go, go, go. But like you said, there's employees, there's family. Those people rely on you for their well-being and income and protection. So if you don't plan well for your business, you're also creating loss for those in your circle. And what people don't often understand is that when you die, remember that your business is valued at date of death, especially for estate duty tax purposes. So your business could be worth 10 million, but if you have no succession plan in place, in 2 months after that, it could be worth 1. Or if you don't have a buy and sell, like if you can elaborate on buy and sells, like buy and sell at least creates liquidity for the hard work that you put in. But if you don't have it, you could get 0 for your business after you passed.
Absolutely. You know, a buy and sell, one of the purposes of a buy and sell is to peg the value of the business, or to give a valuation method. If you don't have a buy and sell agreement, and you have a private company and you own shares in that company, without a buy and sell agreement, those shares form part of your estate, and they are then left to the beneficiaries if you have a will. And that beneficiary might be your spouse. She might not, or he might not have the capacity, the knowledge, or the appetite to want to run a business.
Or the beneficiary could be in Australia.
100%. And that puts the spouse or the children in a difficult position, because now they have an asset that they actually don't want, or they can't manage. And then on the flip side as well, for the other shareholders of the business, they're now sitting with a business partner that they never wanted to be in business with. They're in business with you, not with your family. So it puts both parties in a difficult position. So a buy and sell agreement is a great way of ensuring that you secure a value, so your beneficiaries of your estate will get liquidity or cash for the shares in the estate, and your business partner then gets the remainder of the shares, or the shares in your business, or you leave it to someone else who you think has the knowledge and the capacity and the appetite, to continue on that business, and that your business partner is happy to be in business with. So a buy and sell agreement is is always what we recommend. It really is a great tool or a great agreement to have in place if you have a private company.
Yes, and I think also, like in terms of business succession planning, you just need to put thought into who would you like to step into your role if you don't have some sort of agreement like that. If you're a sole proprietor or if you've got a PTY business, you must also, like we recommend, which Ariana will touch on, in terms of like a business letter of wishes.
Yes.
Where you can, and it can even be your own journaling. You can say at the end of the year, I think that if I die, this person can step into a director's role and get promoted because I see potential. But that also goes a step further, because now your executor can approach that person and say, listen, Daniel or Mish have thought about you and they think that you have a potential to step into this role. Do you want to fulfill it? But if you don't have anything in writing, it's just like all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, again, it comes down to then leaving your family in a position where now they are trying to make these decisions, and they might not know, they don't understand the operations of the business. And, you know, we really do see it time and time again where these things happen. And, you know, everyone says, oh, when I die. It's not when you die. You know, they say, if I die. It's not if you die, it's when you die. You know, those are, you know, the sure things in life is death and taxes. So, you know, you have to provide for that.
Yeah, and also, like, I think in terms of the business, from what I've seen with some of the estates that we've had with business owners, a big thing that people maybe don't consider as much is loan accounts due to you from your business.
Yeah.
The one matter that we had, there was over 5 million rand loan account due to the deceased. Now, the problem is the business doesn't have liquidity if you haven't planned properly to repay that loan. But that loan also goes into your personal state as an asset, so you could be subject to estate duty tax.
100%.
And now estate duty tax, everything over 3.5 million, if it's not going to your spouse, is 20% tax.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of money. Every million, SARS is saying 200,000, that's mine just for being part of this whole environment. So the loan accounts is something I don't think people pay as close attention to, but they're very important.
No, without a doubt, and again, we see it on a daily basis. People forget about those loan accounts, and again, a buy and sell agreement will make provision for a loan account.
Nice.
We would deal with loan accounts and the shares in a company in the buy and sell agreement. So again, it's just about putting all those processes in place to make sure that you've dealt with everything. So that you can have peace of mind that when things do go pear-shaped, that, you know, all the dominoes fall into place.
Yeah, and I think in terms of being able to plan well, you have to look at the risk specific to your type of business, because there are different types of businesses. If you're a sole prop, people don't understand that everything in your business is in your name, so it's all part of your personal estate.
Yes, exactly.
If you've got massive creditors in your business as a sole prop, they can claim from your own personal estate.
Absolutely.
So they can come after your primary residence, for example.
Yes.
So it's also about structuring businesses and making sure that, I don't know if you do this as well, Mish, but if someone comes to you and says, what business should I start? I think it's important to say, maybe look at a PTY because it's got a separate legal identity and stuff like that. But people just start and keep going with it.
Yes. No. So we advise all the time on commercial structures. So the best ways to structure your businesses, the best type of entities, you know, whether you should hold your shares in a holding company, which is then owned by a trust. But, you know, going back to understanding the structure that you have, like, for example, closed corporations. So Section 35 of the Closed Corporations Act says that if you leave your members' interest in a will to beneficiaries, the executor is required to get consent from the remaining members. If they don't respond within 28 days, the executor has to sell those members' interest.
Sure, that's interesting.
So, you know, it's those kinds of things. It's understanding what business you have and what the implications are. You know, a lot of people also, for example, in a private company, you know, when they acquired the shares, when they decided to start a company, they sign a shareholders agreement. You know, sometimes shareholders agreements do deal with involuntary sale triggers, death being one of those involuntary sale triggers. And they're not quite understanding how that's going to work. And then they say, well, the shareholders agreement provides for death. Yes, there's an obligation to sell those shares, but there's no obligation to buy. So other shareholders might say, well, I don't want to buy that,
Yeah.
buy those shares, or they don't have the money to
Yeah.
buy the shares. So again,
Sure.
it's just understanding all of these structures and processes, and then making sure that you put in place what you require and what your family requires.
Yeah, and that's why I think like having someone like yourself, if someone's getting into a business, to say, let me call Mish and just have a review a document. I'm sure that you review contracts, and from your mind and the way that you've studied, you'll be able to pick up something very fast. And I think like to pay for a service that just creates clarity is so important for everyone. So I would also recommend that if someone's getting into business, they must speak to someone like yourself and say, can you review this agreement?
Yes. No, definitely, Dan. I mean, we see it again all the time where people are, you don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish, which often is what happens. People don't want to, pay the initial cost of putting a shareholders agreement in place or putting a buy and sell agreement. But I can assure you, it is far more costly at a later stage.
Yes.
Bite the bullet now, have the contract reviewed, do the buy and sell agreement, do the shareholders agreement, get all your documents in order. It's far cheaper now than at a later stage.
Mitch,
yes.
I mean, from our side, the most painful estates that we see are where there's no access to information. Okay, so at its foundation, if there's no will, it's starting to be painful.
Yes.
But if you don't know who your insurer is, who the other shareholders are of the business, so access to information is so important to creating peace for your family and your loved ones that you're going to leave behind. And I think that part of access to information is what you've been explaining here, is you regularly have to review your agreements. You have to review your buy and sell, and make sure that you do this maybe on an annual basis, Mish, because all of a sudden, I couldn't believe COVID was 5 years ago.
It's unreal.
Honestly, I thought it was like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but we've lost 2 years somewhere, because 5 years is a long time. So in terms of our life, the way that time goes so fast, what we do with our clients is that we also try and check in once a year with an email.
Okay.
Because we can't always rely on ourselves to think, oh, let me check my estate plan, or let me check my contract. So just to have that check-in, it helps, because access to information is so important.
It really is. And, we also advise from a buy and sell perspective, or even just from a general business perspective, is have that review once a year, review your business planning, review your will. Things change so much in a year, as you say. I mean, in the year of COVID, it felt like 2019 was just yesterday. And, now we, at the end of March in 2025, the time really does go so quickly, and things change so rapidly. So, having that annual review is so important, especially for a buy and sell, because generally buy and sells peg the value of the business. And that is something you want to review, because you want to make sure it's always up to date, that if something happens, you are getting value for your business, or the shareholders are getting the correct value for their business. And the same goes for a shareholders agreement. It's reviewing it. Okay, is this still what we want? Have you added other shareholders? Have shareholders left? Maybe the business operates differently. Things change so quickly. It really is important to annually review these documents.
And I think, like, maintaining a FICA file, although it may seem like a burden, it's so important to have. Like, if you agree to, say, buy an asset and you've got shareholders, and it says it in the shareholders agreement, people don't often do a resolution to say, like, hey, we're going to do this, because then when there's a massive fight, they're like, but all of it was just word of mouth. And then the fight starts. So if you have a resolution, you can say, hey, wait, let's go look in 2024. What did we agree to in writing? So I think having resolutions in place are important, and also like having a legal person like yourself, who's an attorney, to say, let's review this resolution, let's make sure it's neat. And I think that you provide that in-house as well. I'm sure you would, Mish?
We do, we do. So whenever we draft any commercial agreement, so we do a lot of structuring of sales of shares and partners exiting and shareholders incoming. We always do resolutions, because that really can be a turning point of an agreement. If there is a dispute, well, was there a resolution? The Companies Act has those requirements for directors and shareholders resolutions in place, and you have to be compliant with that. And it really is a turning point. And just going back to having your documents in place, Another thing that we often find is people don't have share certificates or share registers.
Sure.
That's needed for when
Yeah.
you don't do buy and sell, or on your death, is to have a file with your share certificate, or make sure that your accountant or your attorney has the share certificates and the share register, and that those are being kept up to date. It is made a little bit easier now because CIPC requires you to submit beneficial ownership for companies.
Yes.
It never used to be like that, but we just find, you know, time and time again, we ask, you know, a client, can we have your share certificates to confirm that you do actually hold the shares? You won't believe it. We've had a client to say, no, I have these shares in the company. So I say, well, do you have the share certificate?
Yeah.
No, and the shares were never created in the MOR either.
Sure.
It was a preference class share, and those shares were never created, so he doesn't own those shares at all. So,
wow.
You know, it's all these issues that people think, yeah, but it's in order.
Yeah.
Have someone review it.
Yeah, Mish, I wanted to ask, so say someone hasn't done this for 5 years, can they retrospectively, as long as they all agree to it, do resolution, say they got a car on finance 2 years ago? Can they do it retrospectively if they come to you to say, can you review?
So depending on what it is that you want to, you know, retrospectively review, but for the most part, you can ratify, directors ratify decisions that were made in the past. And again, I would suggest that you have someone review that and then go and put those resolutions in place.
And I think having a strategy, so like you get your review, but to not fall back into that bad habit, you have a strategy to say, in my mind, if we ever have an important decision as a business, let's all do a resolution together as shareholders. So that, like you said, if something happens to someone or there's a fight, it's very easy to refer to black and white paper than just to people's thoughts and opinions.
Yes. And, you know, from Quattro's perspective, that's why we have everything in-house. So we love having clients being part of every aspect of Quattro. Because we've got our legal team, we've got our accounting team, we've got the life team who do the life insurance and, you know, all your policies, the medical aid team. Everyone is all linked. A lot of the time we find people, their attorneys doing one thing, their accountants doing something else. They've got a short-term insurer here, long-term insurer. You know, nobody's talking to one another. So, you know, to have everything in one place and to have one entity or one person that's dealing with everything is really crucial to making sure that all your ducks are in a row.
Yeah, and also I think it's so important, and I often don't find this as much, as that people that specialize in a certain industry, they really help with efficiency in everything, in every aspect in your life. So with us, with the deceased estate administration, we don't do anything else. So we might look at an estate and someone might think it's going to be a long, complicated process. We can often say it might be long, but we can make sure that it's as smooth as possible, because we often rely on the act. Like you said, there's a Companies Act. All of these acts that we have, it's important that that is the foundation, because if you deviate from the act, that's where the problems start. So honoring the act actually protects you.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think you guys have assisted us with, you know, quite a few estates that we've had. And
not
and
always smooth sailing, Mish. Estates aren't always just roses. Like, that's the thing, is that you also have to have an emotional, you have to be empathetic, but you also have to be professional. And people think that estates, they often think, oh, it's going to take 8 months, we'll be done and dusted, it's all good. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that we need to get approved through the master. And as you know, it's not always that easy.
And that's even more reason to use a specialized, you know, estate planning company like yourself. To have, you know, someone like Quattro involved in terms of your, you know, your business documents, and that is because the more you have in place and the more organized it is, the easier it is for your family, the easier it is for your business. It's hard enough when you have those documents in place, because you have to get through the obstacles of the master's office and SARS and, you know, all the regulatory processes that have to be followed. So, you know, it really is just important to have all of that in place to make everyone's life easier.
And I mean, Mish, you know, like I was just thinking, so on the loan account side as well. So often you might be owed money from your company, but it could be the other way around, where you owe your company money. Some strategies that have taken place is where, say, a director would not want to pull a salary, so they'd rather build up a loan account. But then when they die, remember, you've worked for this, but you still owe the company money because you're building up a loan account. So, I mean, even having a life policy where you say a percentage of this policy needs to be paid to my company to repay a loan, for example, can help with peace of mind. Um, but I think what I wanted Ariana to just jump in with was the business letter of wishes. So, Ariana, if you just want to discuss that a little bit, and then we can just have a.
Sure. So as Dan said, when it comes to estate planning, the more information you and your loved ones have access to, and your executor, makes it more easy when the time comes. So having access to information with your personal estate planning and your business is important for both sides. I think you touched on that as well, Mish, that just having this information in one place, knowing all these details is so important.
Yeah.
So, yeah, when it comes to personal estate planning, I'm just going to touch on a few things that are important to have. So as you mentioned previously, your will is the most important, especially whether you have a business or not, but especially if you have a business and especially if you are a sole proprietor, because then your business and your estate is one and the same.
Yes.
So then also having your next of kin details, your spouse, your marital regime, all of that on file is important, and your tax records as well, especially if you're a sole proprietor. So if you're married in community, your spouse owns half the estate. This is important for your spouse to be aware of, and any potential business partners as well. And then ensure that you've nominated a professional executor, someone who does this for a living and who can actually ensure that there's a smooth transfer of your business to the next person once you pass away. And then if you have a family-run business, it's important to have someone independent as well, so they can mediate any potential disputes amongst your family members and honor your wishes. I'm not sure if you have anything to add on that side for now.
I think Ariana made a good point about family businesses. So we do deal with quite a few family businesses, and it's always interesting because people are always, oh, it's my family, it's my son, and we have such a great relationship. We have a saying in Quattro that money make funny, and it's so true that when someone dies or when something happens, people change, relationships change, and whilst they are your family, we really do suggest to have that independent person, or to still put the shareholders agreement in place, or to still put the buy and sell agreement in place. Treat it like an arm's length transaction, because although they are your family, as I say, relationships change, things change. You never know if you pass away, your son gets remarried or your husband gets remarried, and that changes the dynamic of everything. So it is really important to have that in the back of your mind. No one wants to think that, think the worst of those kinds of situations, but they are a reality.
Yeah, and I think also, like Mish, like you said, with the buy and sell agreements or the shareholders agreements, having an independent person who's outside of that family unit is very important to have it together. Same with executors on your will. A lot of people will nominate a family member, but they don't understand when you accept executorship, there's a massive burden, not only burden, but a liability. And often there could be conflicts of interest. For example, a dad might nominate one son as executor when there's 3 kids. Now the state is 18 months in, and the other brothers and sisters are saying, but you are doing a useless job. What are you doing? So they have to accept all that responsibility.
Yes.
Whereas you just have a professional appointed who's completely independent to your family, all that they do, there's no emotional connection there. They just say, we're here to abide by the will, who the beneficiaries are, and to follow the act with the master. It doesn't become an emotional thing.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, Dan. And it's interesting because I actually had a discussion with a client the other day about this. So he only wanted to appoint his spouse as the executor. And I mean, as you know, you can only be an attorney, an accountant, or a trust company to be appointed for an estate that's not an 18-3 estate. And I said to him, you're now putting your spouse in a very difficult position because she's now lost her husband. She doesn't know, that is in itself is a massive thing to deal with. Grief is, it's hard. And now she has to go and find somebody to wind up the estate because she's not able to do it on her own. And in those situations, everybody knows somebody that can do it. And then this person and that person. And now she's conflicted or he's conflicted because they now have got all these options and they don't know what to do. Just appoint the independent person that specializes in doing estates. And it just makes everyone's life easier. It
Yeah.
really does. It gives you peace of mind that your estate's going to be handled correctly. Your spouse has peace of mind that the professionals will deal with it.
Yeah. Mish, I just want to say that that advice that you gave the client is exactly how we would advise our clients. And now this live is just for educational purposes. We always recommend you either consult with a professional, like, because everyone's got a different estate plan or something. But I really agree with that advice, Mish, because I often say where there's vulnerability, there's predators. So when you are now surviving spouse, the master, if your estate's over 250,000 Rand, is saying you need a professional agent if you're executor. So she won't even be able to really have control because she'll have to appoint a professional.
Exactly.
Now, one thing that people don't consider, Mish, is that, remember, for example, if we or you are nominated as executors on a will, we are governed by the statutory executors fees of 3.5%.
Yes.
But now if a spouse goes to an attorney or an accountant or an FPSA and says, can you help as my agent, they could bill an hourly rate because they're not governed by that statutory fee. Now, all of a sudden, the fee can be 25%. And if they sign agreements without review, because remember, emotionally, we are full when we've lost someone we love, we don't want to read, so we just go and sign. Now, there's a massive problem because they can get into big liabilities. Yeah. That's another thing that people should consider. Just nominate a professional from the start. Even as co-executor, Mish, you could have been, but I know it's not, people don't always want to accept executorship, but I think it's important if you want to have a family, let's be co-executors with professionals.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's the advice that was given. And as you say, Dan, this is, you know, this is more just for educational purposes. Yeah. It's not an advice giving session, but you know, it is that is the advice, is to, you know, to appoint the professional. And if you really want a family member to provide an oversight role, then, you know, then appoint the spouse or the son or the daughter.
Yeah, because even in that case, the spouse will still need to appoint the agent, which will be the professional on the will.
Exactly.
But it just gives her the release of the burden of trying to find someone or get into agreements after death.
Exactly. It's, you know, I mean, you would know grief is exceptionally hard, and the last thing you want to be doing is now trying to negotiate fees and sit and talk to professionals and now make a decision about who should wind up the estate.
Yeah. So I think that's, I mean, what Ariana's just touched on, you see how much we can talk about with this is just the first point on the business letter of wishes. So now it shows you how much value there is to have it in place.
Yeah, no, there really is, yeah.
Definitely, but then when it comes to business estate planning, there's a lot more that needs to be included as well in your business letter of wishes. So you want to have things like the legal and trading names of your business, the registration number if it's a PTY or a public company or a CC, your role in the business and who you would like to take over for the day-to-day running if something would happen to you. Just have a person in mind, someone you can mention, you know, why I would want this person and what's my advice for them.
Yes.
Who has access to the payroll, for example, to pay your staff salaries when you pass away. Things like this is so important.
Yeah.
Who is your business legal advisor? Who is your business accountant? Where are those records kept? All of this stuff is so important, especially if you're a sole proprietor.
Absolutely. I think, Ariane, make a good point, especially if you're a sole proprietor and you sort of wearing all the hats, you know, with doing payroll and marketing and everything.
SARS, VAT.
To have that letter of wishes is so important, detailing all of that information so that the person who then steps into your shoes has some sort of idea of what they need to be doing.
Yeah, and you know, like Mish, what I often advise clients is that, and this can apply to your business as well, is that if you own a home, you know exactly what your monthly costs are, what's important to maintaining the home. But when you die, the executor or your family may not have a clue of who the home wanders with, who your security company with. What do you do to maintain that house? And I often provide clients with advice to say, just write a short list of what monthly things you do to maintain your home, who your maid is, who the person cleaning your yard is, and like basically steps in terms of maintaining that property, put it in writing. And the same with a business. I mean, who's your most important customer? Who should you contact if you pass that gives your business life? Who have you got agents agreements with that should be made aware of your passing? Those are all very important things to have in writing so that, again, access to information so that if you pass, it's a smooth transition.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And then another important thing to have for your business is like the details of your investment in the business. So when did you start the business? When did you invest in the business? How much capital or assets did you give to the business or invest in this business? Are there any loans owed to you? Or do you owe any money to the business? Things like this as well. Any policies you have, like you said, there's a buy and sell agreement. Is this supported by life policies? How will this work? This is where having a well-drafted buy and sell, like you said, see a professional who can get all this in order and have these documents on hand for you. What about your pension? Do you have an RA? All of these things. So if you have loans due on debt, this can cause a liquidity issue in either your estate, if you owe money, or in your business, if your business owes money to you.
Yeah.
So having a buy and sell agreement and funding this with a life policy can bring certainty to your beneficiaries and your business, partners or shareholders as well. And then there's also estate duty implications for this.
Yeah.
Benefits.
Yeah.
It may not be dutable if you have it drafted correctly.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And then I also wanted to add in, Mish, I think it's important for businesses to maybe look, business owners in particular, especially in our industry, to look at professional indemnity insurance, because that can be crippling to a business if you are sued for something that you have maybe put in a document or you haven't done something correctly, or just in course of normal business. Maybe you've lost fees on a certain client. I don't know if you can advise on any PI cover or what your experience with PI cover is.
Yeah, so Dan, I'm not an insurance specialist.
Yeah.
But obviously, from mitigating a risk perspective in your business is to have insurance in place. So the other, obviously PI is important.
Yeah. Does Quattro provide PI cover?
So we can do quotations on that.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
So it's about. So PI is obviously important where you're giving advice and there's risk. But what is also important is if you're signing surety for documents. We find that people tend to overlook it and they think they're just signing a simple document.
It will never be worst case.
Yeah, and as you know, if you've signed a personal surety, you actually need to have that released when you pass away.
Yes.
So another aspect to look at it, and there is insurance that you can put in place to cover that in the event that personal surety has been called upon. But a lot of the time people or business owners, they need a credit facility, so they go to the bank, they get a bond or they get a loan, and unfortunately with banks there's not really much negotiating room. It's sort of take this facility and these are the conditions, and most times it's a surety, a personal surety, because your business probably doesn't have any assets or you've just started out, so they want some sort of security. And that security is your personal surety. And most people, they sign it because they need the facility. And they don't understand what they're signing.
A lot of people say run away from signing a surety, even for your kids.
No. And there's massive risk in signing sureties. There's standard clauses that most banks or any sort of credit, companies include that have huge ramifications if you don't understand or if they're not dealt with correctly. So, putting in place the necessary insurance, also dealing with that in a shareholders agreement. You often find if there's 4 shareholders of a company and one signs the surety, and then they sign the personal surety. Now, if that's called upon, they on the line, and the other 3 shareholders, that needs to be dealt with. It should be dealt with in their proportion, so in their ratio of shareholding. So
that's a good point.
It's making sure that's dealt with. Again, that's something that's often overlooked from a business owner's perspective.
I think basically what I'm picking up is that you have to be so vigilant as a business owner with every step that you take. And not just sign stuff because you're in a rush. Because it can get you into trouble.
And Dan, that's the service that we provide. So we walk hand in hand with our clients, which are all business owners,
awesome.
at every stage. And we do offer a sort of monthly membership that gives business owners discounted rates to our legal services.
Advice.
Yes, because we understand that legal services and attorneys fees is not something that people generally want to pay for.
Yeah, and it can get expensive, especially if you're in trouble.
It does. It adds up, and we truly value business owners, and I think entrepreneurship in South Africa is core to our economy.
Yeah.
So, it's so important that we're able to provide business owners with that service of mitigating the risk. So, we like to walk hand in hand with the business owners, and at every point they'll say, can you review this? Can you review that?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And Ariana, I don't know if you...
So I wanted to say as well, it might be a good idea. So you've chosen this person who you would like to take over, but in the event of them not being able to or not being willing to take over your business, is there someone else that you have in mind? Maybe a second person who could make a suitable appointment or take over themselves?
I think that's a good point, Ariana, but even better, and this is what I often say to clients with a will, if you nominate a guardian, just ask them, say, I'm considering nominating you as a guardian, because the last thing you want is for you to pass and them to say, listen, I don't have capacity, I'm not going to accept guardianship. Same with the business. I think it's quite nice to maybe just say subtly, like, I think there could be opportunity. It's a bit more tricky with the business side, but I think with guardianship and wills, it's important to approach a guardian to say, we've nominated, because it's quite a nice thing to be considered for.
Yes.
And I think the same with business. It depends how long you've been in business. If you've been in business for some time and this employee's been with you for, say, 5 or 10 years, and you just say, listen, if I pass, I think you could have an opportunity to maybe help run the business.
Yeah.
But it has to be on a case-by-case basis. But I always advise that I think it's good to have a second option just in case. Maybe same for guardians. It might be good to put a second guardian nomination, but if you know that your guardian will definitely accept, there's no need for it.
Yeah, I mean, I would also, say a second option or a contingent option is always a good idea.
Yeah.
If the person passes away, or they've become disabled, mentally disabled,
yes.
And oftentimes people don't update these documents regularly.
Yeah.
So to just have that contingency in that agreement is probably a good idea. But definitely asking the person, especially in a role that requires a lot of responsibility, like guardianship, like directorship. Those are roles of big responsibility, and everyone has the appetite, to take that on. So, and then at least if the person's not interested or doesn't have the appetite, you can then consider other options.
Or you could, I know that there are some sort of businesses at this stage that can provide like a directorship step in during a deceased estate, like a professional will come and step in as a director for the year or two that your business is in estate process.
Yes.
And that may also be something to consider, but it's also important when someone dies, the valuation is important for business. And there's different ways in which you can value a business, but the way that you value it can greatly affect your personal estate in terms of your ownership in it. And what we usually recommend is you can go with a valuation. Obviously, we don't want it to be massively inflated if we're not selling, because it just increases the gross value of your estate. But I always recommend you must have that approved by SARS. So when you do the valuation, you have to get SARS to approve it, because then if there's any conflict, you can say, but SARS has actually approved this valuation. So you protect yourself through that. And it's about leveraging on our systems and our professionals to protect ourselves as professionals and also to protect a family. So,
absolutely.
And I think, Mish, also like with estate duty, a lot of people, there's so much to consider with estate duty. Okay, but something that people don't often consider is that if you die, and everything's going, for example, to your kids, what SARS are calling for now is if you've got any immovable property, they want a valuation done on date of death. Even if you sell the property.
I know.
We had a matter where a property was sold and we put that in the liquidation account, master approved it, SARS said no. We're going back to date of death and we want that valuation.
No, they really are clamping down, and I think it's you know, everyone, no one wants to pay taxes, and everyone's trying to, you know, not pay as little as they can, but
Be wise.
you know, be wise,
Yeah.
and you know, in terms of from an estate planning perspective.
Yes.
So valuations are crucial, especially as you say with the business. There are various ways you can value a business.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, reviewing your buy and sell agreement on an annual basis is so important, because your business is ever changing. So,
Yeah.
you know, you might feel that, you know, it's increased dramatically in a year,
Yeah.
and you want to change the way it's valued.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely reviewing that.
And you know, Mish, this comes down to, again, having an independent professional party being available to even just negotiate and to represent you while in your death. Because some of our matters that we get, there's loans due from the deceased, there's credit cards open, there's bonds. We often negotiate those settlements down to save the client funds. But
Yes.
if you're just a normal person, you're not going to think to, how can I negotiate? How do I word it? But if you've got experience in it, you can actually save thousands for the client just in terms of being vigilant in times of need.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's, you know, it's to have an independent person wind up your estate is, you'd be silly not to.
Yeah, and same with business, like having an independent professional saying, let's look at buy and sell, let's look at the legal documents. Because when, in terms of Marsh Fidelity, I've always leveraged off of professionals to help guide me, because we can't be a specialist at everything. And I think that if you try and be a specialist at everything, you just put too much burden on yourself.
Yeah.
And like to have a spouse be represented as an executor when they have never done an estate, it's a massive burden to put on someone.
Yeah.
But if that spouse is, say, co-executor with Daniel, Ariana, or Mish, immediately that burden's released, because you'll go and speak to the client. Listen, you don't need to worry about this. Small things. They might WhatsApp to say, what's going to happen with the TV license? Don't worry. But just having that answer releases the burden.
Yeah, and I think, Dan, from experience as well, I mean, as you know, I've had some experience with doing deceased estates.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a difficult process, and to have someone that you can speak to and pick up the phone, a person, is it makes a world of difference.
Yeah.
If you're going to a sort of more generalized, you know, deceased estates company, you may not have that personal approach or that personal touch where, you know, the spouse or the child is able to pick up the phone and say, I've just received a letter of demand from whomever for X amount of money and I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
You know, that really makes such a difference, having that personal touch.
Yeah. And also just having the qualifications to provide good advice.
Yes.
Because you might be with a big business, but then an agent comes in, someone young who's maybe just started, they don't have the experience.
Yeah.
Having good advice just creates peace. And like, that's what we've experienced, is that if you can get good advice, it just creates all the unnecessary smoke, and it just provides clarity, which is so important in times of need. You just want things to be clear.
Exactly. And it goes back to what I said earlier. It just makes everybody's life easier.
Yeah.
Death is a difficult process in itself.
Yeah.
So to have everything organized, you know, to know that you've got an independent professional team, you know, that's running everything for you, it just gives you that peace of mind that you can then focus on your business.
Yeah. Mish, thank you so much for your time.
We
look forward to seeing you at Coffee Club on Friday.
Yes, on Friday.
Is it starting time is
8:30
at the Roundhouse in Plantations. Okay, any business owners that are listening, please come join us. Mish, we really appreciate your time. It was an amazing discussion. Thanks, Ariana.
Thank you so much, Mish.
Thanks so much, Dan and Ariana. I really
enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, you guys
Cheers.
too.
Mish.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.